How old were you when you started going to Goodwater?
I was about 3 or 4.
Okay. And you went every summer?
Up until I was in the 5th grade.
Okay. I think I started about 8 and did it until I was 12. So about 4 summers I would go and spend at least a week with my dad.
Well, did you stay at the old crew home place?
I don't know the old room home place. I didn't, strangely, at least I don't know what that was. Maybe I didn't know it, I just didn't know it was there. But I stayed in my grandmother's house.
In Goodwater?
In Goodwater. And it was, grandfather, I think he'd already had a stroke by this time. And so, I didn't see a whole lot of him.
Okay, who was your grandmother?
My grandmother was Kate Dean Crew. She was married to William Louie Crew. And he was called Louie, which I'm called.
Do you know where they lived?
Well, Goodwater, I don't even think had street names at that time.
I don't know the street names.
Okay, but if you were coming up from the main street where the stores are,
Right.
going up the hill instead of down the hill, you turned to the right before you got to the railroad. And you went up that road.
The bridge across the river.
You didn't go that far. You went
Okay.
before you got there.
Okay.
And there was a place you could go down and go up the creek bed there below the railroad, or you could back turn and go up a street of residences. It was not
I don't remember going in that area.
that was the.
But the old crew home place was the opposite side of town
All right.
from where you were.
So the one that I knew as the old thing of my family was that my great-grandmother, my grandfather's mother, lived in a house right downtown on Main Street. And it was just not a particularly grand house, but probably larger than
Yeah.
some.
What were their names?
I believe her name was Elizabeth, and I believe his name was Robert, but I'm not really sure.
William Robert.
I think so.
That's Uncle Billy Bob.
Now, there was an Uncle Billy Bob that lived right next door to my grandmother and father.
Okay, well, Uncle Billy Bob.
But so
In my mind, lived across the railroad track. He crossed the bridge,
okay.
which went over the railroad.
I think there were lots of Billy Bobs. but
Okay.
I'm not sure.
Well, this was Granny, my grandmother's brother,
Okay.
and we called him Uncle Billy Bob.
Well, I always knew this, and he was sitting very friendly with the little boys and children. And he had, well, all of those houses along there had, except my grandparents, they were right on the street. But most of them had very long lawns.
This one did not. You had the street was very close, and you had to almost step down to get to the house.
And then there was a cousin named Louis, L-O-U-I-S, not the I either, my grandfather, who ran a dry goods store downtown. And in fact, I think I showed you a picture of me standing in front of his dry goods store, and Ernest was there, and I was there maybe 15 years ago. And he lived farther on up on the right. And then there was some family member that lived right across the street, and I'm embarrassed not to remember their names because they had children, and I remember we played together. And then there was Hattie Lee Fleming. My grandmother's sister married a Fleming. And they lived, if you went down the hill and down Main Street, and then slightly on up past the Presbyterian Church or wherever. And before you got to the cemetery, you got to Hattie Fleming's home. And she was she never married, but she was the sister.
If came from the old home place. When you got to Main Street, there were 2 churches and a big cemetery across the
Right.
street.
Right.
Okay. And one was right on the corner, and one was just maybe a short block.
That, the Baptist one's the short one.
I don't remember which was which.
I believe it was the Presbyterian was like that. Because and my grandparents and Patty and a whole bunch of others in the family are buried around that. I guess most of them.
Yeah, I think all of them. I think Uncle Morton and most of them are buried in that cemetery, but one of his daughters is buried behind the old home place.
Okay.
She was my age. Now, I've never seen that cemetery, but I was told that's where she is. And that was Livy, she was the youngest.
Now, I know my father would often take me out to Hatchet Creek.
Yeah, I've heard of old Hatchet.
Yeah, and then he would also take me just lots of country roads,
Yes.
many of them unpaved. And we would stop at various places and he'd say, so-and-so was buried in that little tiny cemetery. There were little cemeteries in the backyards and people where various family members were buried.
Did you ever go to visit your father? I think it was your father's sister, it was my grandmother's sister, Lily. In, I forgot the name of the town, the small town.
Don't remember that.
Rockford.
No.
But that's the county seat.
Wait,
And I've never been to Rockford.
Oh, I lived there, see, for 5 years.
Okay.
What was your grandfather's profession?
My grandfather was a grocer, and he had his profession was banker. But he had a grocery store, and he had a filling station, and he had a lot of rental property.
In Goodwater.
And his major investments that kept my grandmother solvent for 3 decades after he died, was in Alabama Power Company.
Yes. Alabama Power is pretty strong in that area.
And it was, it was not one of those speculative stocks, but you're not gonna run out of customers if you've got the power company.
Right.
I mean, and
Well, I asked that because if he had businesses in Goodwater, if you tell Helen where they were, maybe she remember a bank or a grocery store.
Oh, to me, Uncle Billy Bob, that I called Uncle Billy Bob, was the banker. Now, I don't know if he owned the bank. All I know is he worked at the bank.
Was there only one bank in Goodwater?
I think there may have been two,
Okay.
but I'm not sure.
I think you're right. I think you're right.
My name is an interesting when you talk about the bank. My name is, my birth name is certificate, Erman Louie Crew Jr.
Right.
But Erman is not a very common name. Turns out that when William Louie, my grandfather, and Kate Dean, his wife, had their first child, they had only 2 children. He was starting his bank, and he didn't have the money on his own to finance a bank. And a Jewish banker from New York, somehow they got in touch, and he was the bankroll for the project. And he named his son for an Alabama Baptist to name his son for a Jewish Baptist. I think, we're related to the boss. I just love that story. It reminded me when a friend of mine whose name was Brooke Mosley, he was the Bishop of Delaware, Episcopal Bishop, and he was on his way, and then he later became dean of Union Seminary in New York.
Mm-hmm.
And
Who were your grandfather's siblings? What were their names?
I don't think I ever really knew.
Okay, all right. What about your father's siblings?
My father's had one, Beth. She was named for her grandmother, and Elizabeth. And she had one child by adoption, and who is still alive and in her just turned 70 and lives in Birmingham, and is a major talented musician. She had operatic quality voice, but no aspirations for that kind of grueling life. She went to Sanford, graduated, and has mainly taught school and done a whole lot of church singing. Had done Shady Grove?
Shades Crest,
That's it.
Birmingham, yeah. Okay, Benjamin Franklin Crew, that was Grammy's father, is that right? Clara Maud Crew's father, Uncle Tony, isn't that what they call him? Am I right?
Well, and
Am I mixing things up?
no, I think that's right.
Did you know him? I mean,
No,
okay, but he had, and was Uncle Billy Bob one of his, or that was Granny's brother, is that right? Okay.
Right.
What, who were some of the other siblings of Granny, Clara Maud Crew?
Granny was the oldest, I think. I'm not sure, but I think she was the oldest. Then there was Morton, who was the dentist.
In Goodwater?
Yeah.
Okay.
But that's the one who had his dental chair in the living room.
Oh, God, you mentioned that one, yeah.
And then there was Uncle Colonel
Selden Crew.
Selden Crew, who was a doctor, and he moved to Texas. And his first wife died while they were in Texas. Then he married again. He had 2 sons, and to the best of my knowledge, they're both deceased, and I don't think there were any siblings there. And let's see, Granny had Aunt Lula was a sister. There was another sister, Aunt Lily. That's 5. Seems like there were 6 or 7. I can't think of those.
Well, and I was just trying to see if you recognizing any names. Now, y'all are roughly the same age.
Yeah.
You were possibly in Goodwater sometime at the same time, and just didn't know each other.
Well, we may have known each other. That's don't even can't even guarantee that. And what community events do you remember ever going to? Like, I remember going to church picnic, and I remember the skewers for the marshmallow roasting.
No, well, I didn't attend any of those things. I just stayed at home place when I was there. And Mother was working. She worked with the governor in Rockford. So we lived in Rockford.
Did you know a Winston? Anybody named Winston? I don't know whether the last name was Crew. I have a sense that it wasn't, but that his mother was a Crew. And I can't remember. But I remember there were certain times, and I always found it fairly boring. Going around to visit all the cousins and so on, unless there were other children around to play with. But there were certain people, it was the rigueurs, the French say, to go over and see certain people.
I may have to edit this part out because it's from memory and I don't have the Crew genealogy in front of me, but it seems like there was a Winston Elkins, or does the name Elkins ring any bells?
No, but I'm not sure what, because I didn't start thinking in terms of names.
Sure.
And I knew it was always the titles that were intriguing me, like Cudden and Cudden and Cudden, as it sounded to a little boy rather than Cudden.
Wait, say that, I don't.
Cudden instead of cousin.
Oh, right. Well, and I think some of this is a testimony to southern small towns and communities where your kinfolks are only those in the close branch.
Yeah.
You're kind of peripherally aware. You've got second and third cousins around,
Yeah,
and don't necessarily see them and know precisely who they are. I mean,
yeah. I mean, especially if you're a child, I think if you're used to living in that community for a long time, you know them, and Dad would know them all. Most of my visits to my grandmother through the years were at, like I always spent Christmas Eve there. In fact, I kind of resented, never got to stay at home. But on the other hand, we would go over to my mother's sister, my grandmother's sister's house, and we would sing Christmas carols. But we never had enough Christmas carols to carry us through the evening, so we would do multiple Bible readings, and all the children would do Bible readings. And we would then just start with the hymnal. And we would sing everyone's favorite hymn, my grandmother's hymn, which I have to confess, for a long time I kind of thought was kind of the most sentimental hymn of all in the book. I come to the garden alone. And now, I can't tell you how much it means to me just to a friend who played from Mississippi, who played on the Broadway for the musical productions for 30 years, lives in our building. And she gave me when she was growing up in not Vicksburg, but where Elvis Presley was born. Anyway, Tupelo. She at 8 years old was able to improvise, and she did a lot of the funerals at all the different churches. She's got a great musical talent. And she gave me a CD of her improvising hymns out of the hymnal. And that, I can't go through any sort of downtime without needing to go listen to her play that hymn. It's just
We all spent Christmas in Riverview with Granny and Big Daddy.
Now, I never knew of Riverview until I came that summer. I never heard of it.
That's where Granny, who was mauled, and Big Daddy lived in Riverview.
Is it your impression, because mine is so, it's an impression and that only, no sense of really looking closely enough at all the lines that I've got and that stuff that I'm reading, but that my great-great-grandparents, with your great-great-grandparents, sort of, not sort of having a feud that I would know of, but that you're going down the distaff line, the female line, and at least the way Dad charted the male line, and then you complemented that. But there was not a lot of communication between those two after the great-grandparents' generation, is that right? And that was probably geographic as much as anything else.
I think geographic, but maybe relational too,
Because he delivered me.
Okay.
And that was the thing back then, to have the children in the home place.
Have you been back to Goodwater any time recently?
No, I sure would like to.
You don't want to. It's so sad.
I know it is, and
I mean, just shockingly sad.
Have you been to Riverview? Or no? They do have community reunions periodically
what?
at Riverview. They'll have they're just anybody come. I think they're still having them. I can alert you if I see one on Facebook. Donald Luke.
Yeah, but the house has been torn
Oh,
down.
right, yeah.
Yeah.
I remember going on.
And the store's been torn down.
Yes.
They don't have enough energy to tear it down, I think, in Goodwater.
But you've been to Goodwater.
I went 15 years ago.
Okay.
But, it was just depressing. And I talked to somebody else recently. I think it may have been Mark, I don't know. But who had gone and we both just wept, just thinking how.
Well, I was told by Marshall Cruz's son, who still owns the home place, and he rents it. Several years ago, to be very careful when I went there because there was a lot of crime.
A lot of crime and poverty is rank, and the drug stuff is
Probably.
just.
Of course, it's a small town. It's not.
It always has been, yeah.
Yeah.
One of my favorite memories, and this is a strange one to come up with, but sitting out, maybe playing solitaire or whatever, playing with dominoes by myself when you build your little, was listening to the sawmill, and particularly because, but it turned out not to be a regular, the sawmill that I thought that was there too, but one of the only few industries that they had in Goodwater was to make caskets. And the saw I was hearing was making these wooden caskets in Goodwater. And it was a lovely, because if you didn't know that, it was a lovely sort of very regular kind of pulse to that sound. I've been stayed fascinated with it for an hour at a time.
Do you know who owned it?
No.
Yeah, Helen, were you familiar with it?
Don't know anything about that.
It's very
And you never went into the Baptist church there. I never went into the
Well,
Presbyterian.
see, I didn't know which church was which. The one on the corner. And then there was one across the street, block or half a block up across the street. But I don't know which was which.
The Baptist, since I didn't go to the other one, I'm not sure what it looked like, but the Baptist one was in the round kind of thing, which I always thought it was Methodist, since that's the way the Methodists did it on my right there. But as opposed to ones with more proscenium, I guess you'd call that, than the row and row and row of straight pews. These were curved pews.
You said round.
Yeah.
Did they have a slate balcony? Yeah, there are some churches
No.
still have the remnants that I was.
I was never in those two churches.
I got the impression slavery was not, well, I certainly know it was not true of my family. That my mother's folks up in Etowah County did have slaves, but not obviously by the time mother came along, that was long gone. But
Are you familiar with the architecture that's called slate balcony?
yes.
Okay, all right.
Yeah. But I don't really, I think I would remember it. I don't remember about when it. Do remember that the windows were not all stained glass, as many churches just waited till you got the money to add another window if someone else died and made one was in the morning. But they did have at least two of the huge ones completed.
And one thing I want to make sure, just for purposes of the video and just
Sure.
history, tell us first of all what year each of you were born, and also what years approximately you were in Goodwater, in and out when you were growing up. Helen, what year were you born?
1933.
Okay, and so the time you would have been in and out of Goodwater is, you said, until you were in 5th grade, which would be?
Up until 5th grade, Mother worked in Rockford. So, since she was working, she needed somebody to keep me. Sometimes she had a maid to come and stay with me, but most of the time I spent my summers in Goodwater. After I was probably from 3 or 4 years old till I was in the 5th grade.
So probably about maybe 1944 or something.
Can't remember the year.
Sure.
Sorry.
Where did she work in Rockford?
She worked for the government.
Okay.
And not too long after, I'd say a year or two after she'd been working with them, they decided to close that section. I forgot the name of it, man. Farm Security Administration. And we would go to each of the farmers, and she would get a list of all their crops.
Louie, you were born in?
1936 in December.
Okay. So
And I didn't go to, I mean, I was taken for Christmas all those times, but I did not go until I was probably 8, until I was 12, so I'm 8. I would have turned 8 in 1943, and I would go until 1948. I mean, we continued to visit after that, but not for any overnights.
Okay.
And I remember that, because some of that's the war, I remember my aunt was staying in my grandmother's and grandfather's home. They had built an apartment for them in the back of that house. Her husband was an artist and did a lot of commercial art. He did a lot of the billboards, the panels on city buses, where they have the advertisement. He would do that sort of thing.
You remember his name?
Gordon Bugg.
What?
Gordon Bugg.
B-U-G-G.
B-U-G-G.
Okay.
And I've forgotten now the point I was going to make. That's all right. But
You're talking about the war.
oh yes, oh that's right. And they had a map, because he was in Europe, her husband. They had a map showing where he was, and they followed the war by radio quite a lot. Also, they had a collection of books, mainly Reader's Digest, just condensed books and so on. But she had gone to Judson College, and Dad later became a trustee of Judson. But she also was a painter, and they both were artistic. And and they had a collection of best loved poems of the American people. And now, since I've written lots of poetry myself, I treasured that experience. And I would read, sit in the little den that they'd added back there, sun den, they called it, I think. So it had lots of light coming in. And it was not quite as dreary as an old house might look. And then they brighten out and sit there reading the poems aloud. And then I've got to listen to soap opera.
Gordon's wife's name was
Beth.
That was Beth. Okay.
Yeah. And Beth and Gordon adopted Sally, and when I was 8 years old, and they had moved out to a lake that they had made out from good water, not more than a mile and a half. And he moved his studio from the barn at grandmother's house to a shed that they had made out there. He later got a job in Birmingham and commuted to Birmingham every day. That's a long way from Goodwater.
It is.
And especially before interstates.
Right.
And they then bought a house in Woodlawn in Birmingham. And grandmother died in the home in Birmingham in the 1960s.
Well, he and Granny may have known each other because my grandmother, Maud, was an artist.
Okay. I'm sure they would.
She was quite good. I have a lot of her paintings.
It would be hard. Beth was not. I later found out a lot of hers were copies, which she was very artistic, and just the love of art and so on. Just
Granny loved it.
I've always wished I had more talent in it, but I think I also had more talent than I cultivated, because I could not do quite the exact thing, but I had the talent to imagine all kinds of new shapes, and so I'm having a lot of fun with Photoshop trying to do some of these things. I was lucky enough at Baylor, which was not an outstanding faculty, but there were certain outstanding people on it. And I was lucky enough to study under Paul Baker, who had started the Baylor Theater, and it had 7 stages in the main as part of the theater. And it was second only to Yale in terms of this drama program. And he had gone to school with Burgess Meredith and Charles Lawton. They were very good friends. And every year that I was at Baylor, Burgess Meredith and Charles Lawton came to perform with the students in the plays. And he taught a course in the creative process, which most of the people who took it, and it was a huge, back in the days when they had small classes, this was one huge class, like 150 people. And it was an absolutely fascinating course. And I waited until the senior year, because I kind of thought that's not too easy or whatever. And I was all doing the harpings. And I got there and just fell in love with the course. And he taught us that we needed to compose a song, and he got some help to transcribe, like we got to whistle it or hum it or whatever. And we needed to bring in a painting that we had done. He went over to the bookstore and they had Skiller. I don't know if the Skiller is still around, but it was a Swiss print thing. It was pretty good quality at that time. You could buy them for maybe, 50 cents was a lot, but still you'd have to pay. But he had to bring all 7 stages were covered with these printings, and you have to go around and write about what you saw in the painting. He was not interested in the story of Van Gogh's life at that point. He wanted you to get involved into and he said that if you grow old and don't have something of your own creation on the wall, you've lost some of your humanity. And I can't always say that I had anything worth anybody else looking at, but I've always kept something that I've drawn or something on the wall. It was an enormous gift, because he wanted you to know that you don't live life just vicariously through someone else, that you are meant to have this experience yourself. I think it's part of what was a major part of the way I tried to teach, too. Because so many people teach to the exam. And this is to teach to the experience. And actually, not so much to teach you the experience, but to free you up to have the experience. It's like, and I see the same thing in the faith. I tell people all the time in the Episcopal Church where I'm a member, we're running the risk of keep treating people as clients instead of disciples. You come here and the professional do the religion, and you come listen to them talk about it. Well, Dad had this real sin. And I remember something my father did for me once, when I may have told you this story, but we were going to go to Sunday school, and I was getting dressed, and because we all were every Sunday, Dad was every other Sunday taught the men's Bible class, and he came and said, "Son, we're not going to church today." I said, "Why?" He said, "We're going fishing." I said, "But I pledged to come to church," and I checked that. He said, "That's precisely it. Christianity is not a check-off book. We're in danger of winning one of those medals." He said, "You know, Miss so-and-so, I named her up the street that has the 70 cats and runs the loan company downtown. She sells things to people that she knows they can't afford, goes back and repossesses them and sends them out. But she's got 17 of those medals." It's not about medals. It's about how you treat people. I still remember that to this day. It's just a wonderful thing for a father to do as a very devout Christian. But he understood that it was a relationship to God and to that community. It's just a really powerful experience. Thank you for letting me think about that today. Because it just, it was wonderful.
You're a very smart individual.
Well, I don't know about that.
Yes, you are.
I'm just very lucky to have some smart people around me, and I can fake it like I came up with all these things.
Well, thank you both.
Thank you. I'm so glad to have this time with you.
Thank you.
Thank you.